Welcome back to Speak and Feel English, the space where conversations are not just heard, but deeply experienced. I'm Mia.
And I'm Ethan. Today's topic is something that sounds simple on the surface, but has a surprisingly deep impact on every area of life: the power of not reacting.
Exactly. It's interesting because most people think strength is about speaking up instantly, defending yourself immediately, or responding quickly to everything around you. But what if real strength lies in choosing not to react?
That's a powerful shift in perspective. We live in a world where everything is fast: messages, opinions, arguments, judgments. There's almost this invisible pressure to respond right away. If someone says something offensive, we react. If something goes wrong, we react. If we feel misunderstood, we react.
And often, those reactions are emotional, not intentional. That's where the problem begins. When you react without thinking, you give control of your emotions to the situation or the person in front of you.
Yes, and that loss of control is subtle but dangerous. It feels natural in the moment, but over time, it shapes your personality, your relationships, and even your mental peace.
Let's break this down. What does not reacting actually mean? Because some people might confuse it with being weak, passive, or avoiding conflict.
That's a good point. Not reacting doesn't mean you ignore everything or suppress your feelings. It means you create a pause between what happens and how you respond. That pause gives you power.
That pause is everything, because in that small moment, you go from being controlled to being in control.
Exactly. Think about it like this. If someone criticizes you harshly, your first instinct might be to defend yourself or attack back. But if you don't react immediately, you give yourself time to ask, is this worth my energy? Is this even true? Does this person's opinion define me?
And most of the time, the answer is no. But we don't reach that clarity because we're too busy reacting.
Right. Reaction is impulsive. Response is intentional. And there's a big difference between the two.
I think one of the biggest reasons people struggle with this is ego. When someone says something that challenges your identity, your beliefs, or your self-image, your ego feels attacked.
And the ego wants to defend itself immediately. It wants to prove something, to win, to be right. But the truth is, not every situation needs a reaction. Not every comment deserves your attention.
That's something I personally had to learn. There was a time when I would respond to everything. If someone misunderstood me, I had to explain. If someone criticized me, I had to defend myself. It was exhausting.
And what changed for you?
I realized that reacting was draining my energy more than the actual situations themselves. The real problem wasn't what people said, it was how much importance I gave to it.
That's a powerful realization, because when you stop reacting, you start protecting your energy.
Exactly. And energy is everything. The way you feel, the way you think, the way you show up in life. It all depends on where your energy goes.
Let's talk about emotional triggers, because reactions usually come from triggers, things that touch a sensitive part of you.
Yes, triggers are like hidden buttons, and when someone presses them, you react automatically. But here's the interesting part. Those triggers are actually opportunities.
Opportunities?
Yes, they show you what still needs healing inside you. If something triggers you strongly, it's not just about the situation, it's about something deeper.
That's true. For example, if someone's opinion affects you deeply, it might be connected to insecurity or self-doubt.
Exactly. And instead of reacting outwardly, you can turn inward and ask, why did this affect me so much?
That's where growth happens, because instead of blaming the outside world, you start understanding yourself.
And that's not easy. It requires honesty and self-awareness, but it's worth it.
Let's also talk about silence, because not reacting often means choosing silence, and silence can be misunderstood.
Very true. People often think silence means you have nothing to say, or that you agree, or that you're weak. But sometimes silence is the most powerful response.
Because it shows control. It shows that you're not easily shaken. It shows that you don't need to prove yourself in every moment.
And honestly, silence can say more than words could. It creates space. It creates clarity.
I like that. Silence creates clarity because when you don't react immediately, you allow emotions to settle. And once emotions settle, your thinking becomes clearer.
And when your thinking is clear, your response, if you choose to respond, is more meaningful.
Exactly. Not reacting doesn't mean you never respond. It means you respond at the right time in the right way.
There's also something very powerful about not giving people the reaction they expect, because sometimes people provoke intentionally.
Yes, and when you react, you give them exactly what they want: attention, validation, control.
But when you don't react, you break that pattern. You take your power back.
And that can completely change the dynamic of a situation because now the other person has nothing to feed on.
It's almost like emotional independence. You're no longer dependent on how others behave to decide how you feel.
That's a great way to put it: emotional independence.
And I think that's the core of this topic. Not reacting is not about ignoring the world, it's about mastering yourself.
Yes, it's about choosing peace over proving a point. It's about choosing growth over ego.
And it's a practice. You don't become calm overnight. It takes awareness, patience, and consistency.
But once you start practicing it, you notice a shift. Situations that used to disturb you no longer have the same effect.
And that's when you realize you've changed. Not the world, not the people around you, but yourself.
And that's real power.
I think it's important to go deeper into what actually happens inside us when we react, because most people only see the surface, the words, the actions, but the real story is happening internally.
That's true. Every reaction starts with a feeling, and that feeling is usually triggered within seconds. It could be anger, frustration, insecurity, or even fear. The problem is we rarely stop to identify what we are feeling before we act on it.
And that's why reactions often feel automatic. It's like a reflex. Something happens, and before you even realize it, you've already responded in a way that you might regret later.
Exactly. And the regret is an important part of this conversation because how many times have you said something in the heat of the moment and later thought, I wish I had handled that differently?
Almost everyone has experienced that, and that regret is a signal. It shows that your reaction didn't align with your true self. It came from emotion, not from intention.
Which brings us to self-awareness. If you want to stop reacting, the first step is becoming aware of your internal state. You have to notice what you are feeling without immediately acting on it.
That sounds simple, but it's actually quite challenging because awareness requires you to slow down, and most people are not used to slowing down their thoughts.
Yes, and that's where mindfulness plays a role. Being present in the moment helps you observe your emotions instead of being controlled by them.
Let's give a practical example. Imagine someone criticizes your work in front of others. Your immediate reaction might be embarrassment or anger.
And that emotion quickly turns into a reaction, defending yourself, arguing, or even saying something hurtful in return.
But if you pause, even for a few seconds, something changes. You create space between the trigger and your response.
In that space, you can ask yourself a few important questions. Is this criticism constructive? Is this person trying to help or just expressing their opinion? And most importantly, how do I want to respond?
That last question is key. How do I want to respond? Because it shifts the focus from impulse to choice.
And choice is where your power lies. When you realize that you don't have to react, you start to feel more in control of your emotions.
I think another important aspect is understanding that not every emotion needs to be expressed immediately. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it right away.
That's such an important point. Emotions are temporary. They rise, they peak, and then they pass. But when you react instantly, you turn a temporary emotion into a permanent consequence.
That's powerful. A temporary emotion leading to a permanent consequence. That's exactly what happens in many conflicts.
And that's why learning to sit with your emotions is so important. Instead of pushing them away or acting on them, you allow them to exist without judgment.
That takes practice, because sitting with discomfort is not easy. Most people want to escape uncomfortable feelings as quickly as possible.
Yes, but growth happens in that discomfort. When you sit with your emotions, you start to understand them better. And when you understand them, they lose their control over you.
Let's also talk about perspective, because sometimes the reason we react is not the situation itself, but the way we interpret it.
Absolutely. Two people can experience the same situation and react completely differently simply because they see it in different ways.
For example, if someone doesn't reply to your message, one person might think they're ignoring me and feel hurt. Another person might think they must be busy and feel neutral.
And that difference in interpretation leads to a completely different emotional response. So in many cases, our reactions are based on assumptions, not facts.
Which means that by changing your perspective, you can change your reaction.
Exactly. Instead of assuming the worst, you can choose a more balanced or neutral interpretation. That alone can reduce unnecessary emotional reactions.
Another thing that helps is detachment, not in a cold or distant way, but in a healthy way, where you don't take everything personally.
Yes, because when you take everything personally, every small thing feels like an attack, and that makes you more reactive.
But when you understand that most people act based on their own experiences, emotions, and struggles, you stop taking things so personally.
And that creates emotional freedom. You are no longer reacting to everything because you understand that not everything is about you.
I think that's a huge shift, because once you stop personalizing everything, you naturally become calmer.
And that calmness reflects in your behavior. People start to notice that you don't react easily, and that changes how they interact with you.
There's a certain respect that comes with emotional control. When people see that you are composed, they are less likely to provoke you.
And even if they do, it doesn't affect you the same way because you have built that inner stability.
That inner stability is like a foundation. No matter what happens externally, you remain grounded.
And that's the goal, not to control the world around you, but to control how you respond to it.
Because at the end of the day, you can't control what people say or do, but you can control your reaction.
And that control is not about restriction, it's about freedom, the freedom to choose peace over chaos. I think this is the perfect point to shift the conversation toward relationships, because this is where reactions cause the most visible damage. Whether it's friendships, family, or professional connections, one uncontrolled reaction can create distance that takes a long time to repair.
That's very true. Most conflicts in relationships are not caused by the actual issue, but by how people react to it. The words we choose in emotional moments often carry more weight than the situation itself.
Exactly. And the problem is when emotions take over, we stop listening. Instead of understanding the other person, we focus on defending ourselves or proving a point.
Which turns a simple misunderstanding into a full argument. Both people are reacting, and no one is actually communicating.
That's why not reacting immediately can completely change the direction of a conversation. When one person stays calm, it naturally reduces the intensity of the situation.
It's almost like emotional balance. If one side refuses to escalate, the conflict loses its energy.
Yes, because arguments need fuel, and reactions are that fuel. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding the conflict.
Let's take a real-life scenario. Imagine someone close to you says something hurtful during a disagreement. Your first instinct might be to respond with equal intensity.
And in that moment, it feels justified. You feel like you need to protect yourself or respond in the same tone, but that usually makes things worse.
Exactly. But if instead you pause and choose not to react emotionally, you create a different outcome. You might respond calmly or even choose to step away from the conversation until you're more composed.
That pause can prevent a lot of unnecessary damage, because once words are spoken in anger, they cannot be taken back easily.
And relationships are built on trust and respect. Repeated emotional reactions can slowly weaken both.
Another important thing is understanding the other person's emotional state. Sometimes people say things they don't fully mean simply because they are overwhelmed.
That's a great point. When you don't react immediately, you give yourself time to see the situation from their perspective as well.
And that builds empathy. Instead of thinking, why are they attacking me? You start thinking, what might they be going through?
That shift in thinking can completely transform your relationships because now you're not just reacting, you're understanding.
And understanding creates connection. It allows conversations to become more meaningful instead of turning into arguments.
I also think that not reacting shows emotional maturity. It shows that you value the relationship more than winning the argument.
That's such an important distinction. Many people focus on being right, but in relationships, being right is not always what matters most.
Sometimes choosing peace is more valuable than proving a point.
And when both people in a relationship start practicing this, the dynamic changes completely. There's more respect, more patience, and more space for honest communication.
Even in professional settings, this applies. Not reacting to criticism or pressure in an emotional way can make you appear more confident and reliable.
Yes, because people trust those who remain calm under pressure. It shows that you can handle situations thoughtfully rather than impulsively.
And over time, that builds a strong reputation. People see you as someone who is stable and composed.
I think the next logical step is understanding how to actually build this habit. Because knowing the importance of not reacting is one thing, but applying it consistently is something else.
Exactly. It's easy to agree with the idea, but in real-life situations, especially emotional ones, it becomes challenging. That's why it has to be practiced like a skill, not just understood as a concept.
So where does someone begin? What's the first practical step toward becoming less reactive?
I would say the first step is awareness in real time, not after the reaction, but during the moment when the emotion is rising. You have to catch yourself thinking, I am about to react.
That moment of awareness is powerful, but it's also very short. Most people miss it because emotions move quickly.
That's true, which is why training your mind beforehand is important. Simple practices like taking a deep breath when you feel tension can create that pause we've been talking about.
Breathing sounds simple, but it actually works. When you slow down your breath, you signal your body to calm down, and that reduces the intensity of your emotions.
Yes, and once your body is calmer, your mind follows. That's when you can think more clearly instead of reacting impulsively.
Another helpful technique is delaying your response. You don't always have to respond immediately, especially in situations that are emotionally charged.
That's a great point. Giving yourself time, even a few minutes or hours, can completely change your perspective. What feels urgent in the moment often doesn't feel the same after some time has passed.
And during that time, you can reflect. You can ask yourself, what is the best way to handle the situation, instead of reacting based on how you feel at that moment.
Journaling can also help with this. Writing down your thoughts and emotions allows you to process them without acting on them immediately.
That's a very practical approach. It creates a safe space where you can express everything you're feeling without causing harm to a situation or relationship.
Another important habit is learning to let go of the need to win every interaction, because a lot of reactions come from the desire to prove something.
Yes, the need to be right can be very strong, but when you let go of that need, you naturally become less reactive.
Because now you're not trying to defend your ego all the time. You're more focused on understanding and maintaining peace.
I think it's also helpful to set personal standards for how you want to behave. For example, deciding that no matter what happens, you will not raise your voice or respond with anger.
That creates a sense of discipline. When you have clear standards, you're less likely to act impulsively because you already know the kind of person you want to be.
And over time, these small decisions build a habit. At first, it feels like effort, but gradually it becomes natural.
Consistency is key here. You won't get it right every time, and that's okay. There will be moments when you react, and that doesn't mean you failed.
It just means you're still learning. What matters is that you reflect on those moments and try to do better next time.
Exactly. Growth is not about perfection. It's about progress. Each time you choose not to react, you strengthen that habit.
Another thing to remember is that your environment can influence your reactions. If you are constantly surrounded by negativity, it becomes harder to stay calm.
That's true. While you can't control everything, being mindful of your environment and the people you spend time with can make a difference.
And even in challenging environments, your internal work still matters, because ultimately the goal is to remain steady regardless of external conditions.
That's where true emotional strength lies, not in avoiding difficult situations, but in handling them with calmness and clarity.
And that calmness is not something you are born with, it's something you build step by step.
Through awareness, patience, and consistent effort.
It's important to bring everything together and talk about what mastery of not reacting actually looks like in real life.
Yes, because at this point, it's no longer just about techniques or strategies. It's about a shift in identity, becoming someone who naturally remains calm, composed, and intentional.
Exactly. When you reach that stage, you don't have to remind yourself constantly to stay calm. It becomes your default state. Situations that once triggered you no longer have the same effect.
And that doesn't mean you stop feeling emotions. You still feel everything: anger, disappointment, frustration, but you don't let those emotions control your actions.
That's the key difference. You feel, but you don't react impulsively. You observe, you understand, and then you choose how to respond.
There's a deep sense of inner peace that comes with that, because you're no longer constantly affected by external situations or other people's behavior.
Yes, your peace becomes internal instead of dependent on what's happening around you, and that's incredibly freeing.
I think one of the most powerful outcomes of this is clarity. When you're not reacting emotionally, you see things as they are, not as your emotions make them appear.
And that clarity helps you make better decisions. Whether it's in your personal life, your work, or your relationships, you respond with thoughtfulness instead of impulse.
Another important aspect is self-respect. When you don't react in ways that you later regret, you start to respect yourself more.
That's so true, because your actions align with your values. You're no longer controlled by temporary emotions. You're guided by who you truly want to be.
And that creates confidence, not the loud external kind, but a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are in control of yourself.
It's also worth mentioning that not reacting doesn't mean accepting everything. There are times when you need to speak up, set boundaries, and express yourself clearly.
Absolutely. The difference is that when you do respond, it comes from a place of calm and clarity, not anger or frustration.
And that makes your words more impactful. People are more likely to listen and understand when you communicate calmly.
Because your response carries intention, not just emotion.
I think another beautiful outcome of this practice is emotional independence. You are no longer dependent on others to feel a certain way.
Yes, your mood, your peace, your state of mind, it all comes from within, and that makes you more stable and grounded.
And when you are grounded, life feels less chaotic. Even in difficult situations, you remain steady.
That steadiness is what many people are searching for, often without realizing it. They try to control situations, but the real solution is learning to control their reactions.
Exactly, because control over yourself is the only true control you have.
And once you understand that, you stop wasting energy trying to control everything else.
You become more present, more aware, and more intentional in everything you do.
And that transforms not just your actions, but your entire experience of life.
So if there's one thing to take away from this conversation, it's this. The power of not reacting is the power of choosing yourself over your impulses.
It's the power of choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and growth over ego.
And it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight, but every small step you take brings you closer to that inner balance.
So the next time you feel the urge to react, just pause for a moment, take a breath, observe your emotions, and remind yourself that you have a choice.
Because in that pause lies your true power.
And that power can change the way you experience everything.
Thank you for being with us in this conversation. We hope this gave you something meaningful to reflect on and apply in your daily life.
For more conversations like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and explore all our podcasts on Speak and Feel English.
We'll see you in the next one.